All right, so trap yourself in, folks. Today we're gonna deep dive into a story that's got it all. Elon Musk, the Pentagon, we're talking billions of dollars and maybe even a little sprinkle of controversy along the way.
Sounds juicy.
Oh, it is. We're talking about DOGE, Musk's cost-cutting initiative, and yeah, their recent, foray into the heart of U.S. defense. I mean, this is big stuff.
It's certainly fascinating, especially when you think about the sheer scale of the Pentagon, right?
Yeah,
We're talking a budget of over $800 billion,
huge.
over 3 million personnel. That's massive. It's a huge undertaking for any organization to try and find savings, let alone a private initiative like DOGE. So yeah, lots to unpack here.
Yeah, and they're not shying away from the challenge either. Just last week, DOGE reps met with Pentagon officials. They're kicking off what they described as, get this, a mission to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse.
Straight to the point.
I know, right? They even put that in a tweet, like a rallying cry or something.
Well, it's a message that, a lot of people find appealing, right? The Pentagon's budget has always been a subject of scrutiny. Critics have long argued that there's a lot of room for efficiency improvements.
Okay, so let's talk about these cuts. We know the Pentagon is massive, but where could DOGE actually find these billions in savings? I mean, we're not talking about cutting back on, staplers here.
No, definitely not staplers. To achieve the kind of savings they're talking about, they'd have to look at some major structural changes, potentially targeting things like procurement processes, overlapping programs, maybe even entire departments. We're talking potentially everything from outdated equipment to administrative overhead. Could all be on the table.
Wow, okay, so big changes. What about Defense Secretary Hegseth? He seems pretty enthusiastic about going G, even going so far as to say he wants to welcome Elon Musk personally.
He did, yeah.
And he even said, and I'm quoting here, every dollar we save, there is a dollar that goes to warfighters. What do you make of that?
Well, it's interesting, right? He frames the potential savings in a way that emphasizes putting more resources towards the troops. And that sounds good, on the surface,
It does.
but it doesn't necessarily mean an overall reduction in spending.
Oh, interesting point.
It could just mean shifting funds around within the existing budget.
Right, right. So it's not just about, cutting waste. It's about potentially redirecting those funds. And speaking of redirecting funds, Hegseth also hinted that climate programs might be on the chopping block.
He did.
I don't know, is this giving anyone else some serious deja vu?
It's certainly raising eyebrows, choosing to cut climate programs in the current global context. It's a bold move,
To say the least.
to say the least. And it raises questions about DOGE's priorities and how those align with the Pentagon's long-term strategic goals.
Right, so we've got potential cuts, shifting priorities, maybe even a little bit of political maneuvering going on. But we can't ignore the big elephant in the room here. Elon Musk, this is the guy who runs SpaceX, Tesla, Starlink, and who knows what else. And all of those companies, all of them, have billions, and I mean billions, in government contracts. Doesn't this raise some red flags for you?
It's certainly a valid concern. Reuters estimated that SpaceX alone holds $22 billion in U.S. contracts, with $15 billion of that coming from NASA. And that's just what we know about publicly, right?
Right.
A lot of those contracts, they're classified. So the full extent of his involvement with the government, well, it's unclear.
So we have a private individual with massive financial ties to the government leading a cost-cutting initiative within that same government. That sounds like a potential conflict of interest brewing, right?
It's a situation that demands careful scrutiny. The potential for conflicts of interest, it's undeniable. It raises questions about whether DOGE's recommendations will truly be impartial or if they might be influenced by Musk's own business interests. And it's not just about potential bias. There's an actual lawsuit
Oh, right, right.
filed by several Democratic state attorneys general challenging Musk's role in all of this. They're concerned about his level of authority within DOGE and his access to data within government departments.
So a lot of concern about how much power he actually has.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating legal battle, especially given how, well, the White House insists that he's not a DOGE employee. He has no official authority. They're comparing him to an advisor, someone who might offer some guidance, but they don't make any decisions.
But come on, does anyone really believe that Elon Musk is just some passive advisor in all of this? We've seen pictures, right?
They have.
Of him in the Oval Office, seemingly, leading meetings, discussing findings with officials. It doesn't exactly scream casual consultant, does it?
No, not really. And that's the issue, right? There's a disconnect between what they're saying about Musk's role and the reality of his apparent influence.
Yeah.
And that lack of transparency, well, it's fueling these concerns about accountability and oversight.
Right, so we've got potential conflicts of interest, a lawsuit challenging Musk's authority, and a whole lot of unanswered questions about transparency and accountability. Where do we even go from here?
Well, to understand the potential impact of all of this, we need to take a closer look at what DOGE is actually proposing. We need to go deeper into the specific areas they're targeting for cuts.
Okay, sounds like a good place to start. But you know what? Let's take a quick break and come back to it. We'll pick up right where we left off and continue our dive into this DOGE Pentagon saga.
Sounds good?
We'll be right back. All right, so we've laid out the landscape. We're talking a lot of money, a powerful player in Elon Musk, and questions swirling around everything. Now let's zoom in a bit. What are some concrete areas where DOGE might be eyeing for those cuts?
Well, one area that's been mentioned is procurement. The Pentagon's procurement process, it's notoriously complex and, well, some would argue inefficient. Lots of paperwork, bureaucracy, layers of approving. Like I can, slow things down and drive up costs.
Right, so DOGE might be looking at streamlining that process, cutting through all the red tape. Makes sense, but how much could they realistically save there?
It's tough to say for sure without seeing specific proposals, but even small efficiency gains in procurement, that could translate to some significant savings given the sheer volume of purchases the Pentagon makes.
Yeah, we're talking about like everything.
Everything, yeah.
From, fighter jets to office supplies.
Exactly.
And you mentioned overlapping programs earlier. What did you mean by that?
Well, sometimes you have, multiple branches of the military or even different departments within the same branch, and they're developing, similar technologies or systems.
Oh, I see.
This can lead to, well, a lot of redundancy and wasted resources. So DOGE might be looking to identify and eliminate those overlaps.
So instead of like, the Army, Navy, and Air Force all working on their own separate like drone programs, they would just combine efforts?
Exactly. Consolidate, streamline the development. It could lead to cost savings, maybe even a more effective end product.
Interesting. So we've got procurement reform, we've got program consolidation. Any other big ticket items on DOGE's potential chopping block?
Well, there's been some talk about reducing the Pentagon's administrative overhead.
Okay.
This could include things like, streamlining staffing, consolidating offices, reducing travel expenses. Again, it's all about finding efficiencies, cutting unnecessary costs.
It makes sense, but all this talk about cuts of efficiency, it makes me wonder about the human side of things. What about the people who work at the Pentagon? I mean, are we talking about, potential job losses here?
It's a possibility. If DOG's recommendations lead to, significant restructuring or downsizing, there could be job cuts. It's a sensitive issue and one that would need to be handled very carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the impact on the defense industry as a whole? I mean, the Pentagon is a huge customer for all those defense contractors. If they start cutting back on purchases, won't that have ripple effects throughout the whole industry?
It undoubtedly will. Any significant reduction in Pentagon spending could lead to, layoffs, reduced profits, even, company closures in the defense industry. It's a complex ecosystem. Changes at the top can definitely have far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, this all sounds pretty intense. We're talking potential job losses, industry shakeups, and just a whole lot of uncertainty.
There's a lot at stake for sure. And it's important to, to remember that these are just potential scenarios. We don't know what DOGE will actually recommend or how the Pentagon will respond.
All right, so we've got the what, potential cuts to procurement, overlapping programs, administrative overhead. But what about the why? What's the real driving force behind all of this?
Well, DOGE frames it as, a mission to eliminate waste and improve efficiency. And, on the surface, that's a goal most people can get behind.
Yeah, nobody likes to see their tax dollars wasted.
Exactly.
But is it really that simple? I mean, we've talked about the potential conflicts of interest with Musk's involvement. Is there something more going on here?
That's the million-dollar question. Some critics argue that DOGE's real goal is to privatize more government functions, shifting power and resources away from public institutions and into the hands of private companies.
And those companies just might happen to be run by, Elon Musk. Sounds a little too convenient, doesn't it?
It's definitely fueling some skepticism, and the lawsuit filed against Ma just adds to that suspicion. The plaintiffs are basically arguing that DOGE is operating without proper oversight and that Musk is wielding too much influence over government decisions.
So we've got concerns about potential conflicts of interest, the whole privatization thing, and a legal battle over transparency and accountability. It's all starting to feel a bit like a conspiracy thriller.
It's certainly a story with high stakes and a lot of intrigue, and it raises some, fundamental questions about the relationship between government, private industry, and technology in this 21st century.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Potential areas for cuts, the possible impact on the defense industry and jobs and concerns about privatization, and, well, just a whole lot of unanswered questions. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's important to step back and look at the bigger picture. This isn't just about DOGE and the Pentagon. This is about, the future of governance in a world where technology is rapidly changing, the way we live and work.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's explore that a bit further. All right, so we talked about the specifics of the cuts and the concerns around DOG, but how does this all connect to the future of governance? It sounds pretty big picture to me.
It is, yeah. Think about it. We're seeing this convergence of powerful forces here. You've got rapid advancements in technology, particularly in areas like AI and data analytics, which are, they're already being used in government decision making.
Right, right. And then you add in the increasing influence of private companies, like the ones Musk runs. They're developing these technologies and often have their own agendas
Yeah, their own financial interests.
right at play. It's like this whole new power dynamic is emerging.
Exactly. And this raises some really important questions about accountability, about transparency. Who's really responsible for the decisions being made? How much influence do these private companies have over public policy? Are there even adequate safeguards in place to, prevent conflicts of interest, to ensure ethical decision making?
Those are some tough questions. And honestly, it's a little unsettling to think about these tech giants potentially having so much sway over government decisions.
Yeah, I understand that. It's definitely something we need to be, paying very close attention to. And it's not just about the potential for abuse or corruption. It's also about the implications for democracy itself, right?
Oh, wow.
If unelected individuals or private companies, if they gain too much power, it could really undermine the very principles of representative government.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it feels like these forces are already in motion. It's hard to imagine putting the genie back in the bottle at this point.
Well, for starters, we need to be having these conversations. We need to be raising awareness about the potential risks, the implications of this convergence of technology, government, and private industry.
Okay, so awareness is key. But what about concrete actions? What can we actually do to ensure that these technological advancements are used responsibly and that the government remains, accountable to the people?
There are a few things. First, we need stronger regulations, stronger oversight mechanisms, to ensure that private companies operating in the public sphere are held accountable for their actions.
So more transparency, more accountability for these companies, especially when they're dealing with sensitive government data or influencing policy decisions.
Exactly. We also need to invest in public education, digital literacy programs to make sure that citizens have the knowledge and the skills they need to navigate this increasingly complex technological landscape.
Makes sense. I mean, an informed citizenry is kind of essential for a functioning democracy, right? Especially in the digital age.
Absolutely. And finally, we need to encourage and support independent research, investigative journalism, to hold those in power accountable, to make sure that the public interest is protected.
Okay, so stronger regulations, more public education, a robust free press. Those sound like, pretty solid pillars for a healthy democracy, even in the face of all these technological disruptions.
They are, yeah. But ultimately, it all comes down to civic engagement. We can have the best laws with this regulations in the world, but if citizens are, apathetic or uninformed, then those safeguards they're meaningless.
So what you're saying is we can't just sit back and hope for the best. We need to be, actively engaged, informed, involved in shaping the future we want.
Exactly. The future isn't, it's not something that just happens to us. It's something we create, and that creation process requires active participation from all of us.
Well said. This deep dive has been quite a journey. We went from the specifics of potential Pentagon cuts to this much broader discussion about the future of governance in a technologically driven world.
Yeah, it's a complex and evolving landscape, and it's one that we'll need to navigate carefully and thoughtfully if we want to, ensure a future where technology serves humanity and not the other way around.
I couldn't agree more. And that's what we're all about here at the Deep Dive, right? Providing you with the the information and insights you need to engage in these critical conversations, to shape the world you want to live in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on this exploration. We encourage you to, continue learning, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged.
That's right. Keep asking those tough questions. Challenge assumptions, and never stop seeking knowledge. The future kind of depends on it. Thanks for diving in with us today. We'll catch you next time on the Deep Dive.